Okay. Continue.
Good. So, hi.
Hi.
Would you like to just start by saying your name, maybe where you are, very little bit about you?
Hi, my name is Burt Lazarin, and I'm currently in central New York, near Skaneateles, New York, eastern end of the Finger Lakes. I've been here now 2 months. 2 months. I came up, I thought I'd be here for 10 days or so. Well, here we are. But I'm usually in New York City. That's where I live full time. And every once in a while in Quito, Ecuador. Yeah, I was actually supposed to go to Quito and I canceled my trip like 3 days before I was supposed to go, and I ended up here in that following week because that's when everything closed down. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first question that we have for you is, who are you? This is a who are you as a person? What are some of your interests, your passions, your qualities?
Passions. I like subways. That was interesting. That was one of the first things I mean, I haven't really done very much recently with subways, but when I travel, I like to, in another city, go on the subway. Often like take it to the last stop and see what the neighborhoods are like. My original professional training is an urban planner. So cities are my passion. And I'm real interested, curious, interested, fascinated how the epidemic, the pandemic, what kind of effect it will have on cities. I mean, I could hear it already. My friends, the psychotherapists, they're all doing everything online. And, you know, the whisper in their head is, why do I have to rent an office space? You know, if I can do it, whatever it is, so it's not the same. I don't believe it's the same online. People work remote. Are they all going back to the office? Will the boss, the supervisor, the owner of the company, whatever it is, do we really need these 700 people all together at once? Maybe 100 could work at home. And anyway, I'm following all of that and what kind of, you won't see it immediately, but it will echo through in terms of physical configuration, what actual structures will be needed in the city in the future, as opposed to the ones we have now. Will they be differently, less, more, differently configured? It's interesting. I mean,
So
that's my passion.
That's an urban planner.
That's my urban planning. My urban planner. I also like to travel. That's one of my passions too. And when I get hit by this quarantine and what will happen, I sometimes get, you know, totaling up the losses. Well, maybe one of the losses is no travel, or much less travel. Some of those places I've wanted to go to on my list, and I haven't yet been there, maybe I won't get there. That's might be one of the losses. In addition to the plays I haven't seen or the exhibits that haven't been mounted, or AAG conferences not gone to.
Yes. So, so who else are you?
Who else am I?
Who else are you?
I am a lover, a husband, a brother, a cousin, a community person, connected, I like organizations, not as a general. I mean, I like to be, I find myself, that's the way I grow and the way I connect to my environment is by joining an organization, figuring it out, connecting to people, making friends. Yeah, so I also like, I'm isolated too. I mean, I like groups, I like to be with lots of people, and I also like to, go back in my room by myself. I have this image of me at 10 years old, going back into my room. I was very lucky. I have two brothers. I'm the oldest of three. And we had 3 bedrooms. So the 2 youngest ones had a share bedroom. I was the prince. I had my own. So
Nice.
yeah, since the age of about, when did we move? Maybe since the age of about 7. Before that, the 3 of us, I don't know how we did it. We only lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. And so the 3 of us shared bedroom. I guess we had 3 beds there. I guess. It was a big bedroom, and my parents did not have a bedroom. It's a big living room, and they sort of made it 2/3 of public space and 1/3, private space, though. There wasn't no physical wall there. It was just high bookcases. It separated their area from the living area. That's a long time ago. I'm a family person too. And a father too. Yeah. He's 32. Will be 33 this year. I co-parented with my partner. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So the next question that we have, we'll get more of who you are, I guess, through the rest of this, but it's kind of the point. But who would you say, another human being, who has had the most impact on who you are as a person?
Lots of people just flash through my head. A bunch of them. I can't. But you want one person?
You can pick a couple, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there was a guy I used to work for 30 years. So negative and positive. He was an influence on me, negative and positive. Besides city planning and psychotherapy, I'm also, what I do for a living, or most of my living, is labor relations. I have a business where we work for labor unions. I always have to say, when I do labor relations, I only work for the good people, not management. We do contract negotiations, contract administration, For many years, I worked for one person. He had his own firm, and I worked at that firm for like 30 years, something like that. And then, like I say, he had the good graces to die without making a succession plan. One of those kind of narcissists, who'll never die. And now we have our own business. We took the clients, and with a business partner, we have my own business. So this guy was an influence on me, positive and negative. There were friends of mine growing up in my 30s, 20s too, I guess. Yeah, my late 20s, early 30s. Yeah. People like Patrick Kelly, my friend Michael Altman, they're all gone. They're the ones who got me into Gestalt therapy. They were influences on me, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's so many people. Just thought of Karen Humphrey. She died recently, 3 years ago. She was my first supervisor. You're on mute, Heather.
Oh, I knew I had to do that eventually. Part of the question would be, how, in what ways have these people shaped you? If you want to go into a little bit about that with any of them.
Well, with like Karen, Patrick, Michael. They helped me focus. Focus and slow down. I'm thinking about, because I knew them mostly from this identity house, which still exists, but differently than it did in the 70s and 80s. It was a peer counseling organization, still is a peer counseling organization. They were therapists in addition to peer counselors and other people. And I was very involved, and it helped me grow, become who I am, gave me support coming out into the world, but also the process. Maybe it was their Gestalt background, the slowing down. Well, we don't have to rush ahead. Let's think about this. What is actually going on here? Yeah. I guess that also built on, it helped me articulate maybe stuff that I already had been developing on my own or over the years in college and high school. In the Peace Corps, I was in the Peace Corps. I lived 2 years in Santiago in Chile, and then 4 months in Lima, Peru. Didn't like it, so I didn't last in Peru.
You didn't like the Peace Corps, or you didn't like Lima?
No, I didn't like Lima.
Okay.
And I didn't like the Peace Corps job I had there. Mm-hmm. And I figured I had done 2 years already in Santiago. Mm-hmm. So I didn't feel that obligation to the Peace Corps to go a full another 3rd year. And it was a different situation, and I just didn't work well for me. It was a combination of Lima, the climate, the politics. I was in major coming out mode, and just didn't work altogether.
Yeah, maybe just wasn't the right combination, right?
At that point in my life, it wasn't the right combination. It had worked very well in Chile. Mm-hmm. Chile worked very well. Chile was, and I'm talking 40 years ago. I'm not talking today. I have no idea. But at that time, Chile was much more of a public open space in terms of Santiago, while Lima was very private, closed, not much activity outside that you could find without knowing someone who could tell you where. In Santiago, you could walk and you can figure it out for yourself. You meet people. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the next questions that we have is, what event or circumstance would you say has really shaped who you are?
I mean, you were asking all these kind of one-point questions.
Well, I don't necessarily expect
No,
one.
you know what I mean? Who was the one person who influenced you in your life?
Well, it's
What
kind of
was the one
there
event?
will be a figure that sort of pops out, I'm assuming.
But like as soon as you said it, you know, I thought of like 8 people, 10 people, people I know. I was even thinking of someone who I never knew, but I read his autobiography.
Well, I mean, some people have answered that way. Some people have just, they've taken it in a lot of different directions. And these are just things that we're interested in. So you can take it however you
So
want.
the question is, what influenced me in terms of
No,
what?
what kind of event or circumstance would you say has shaped you? And I mean, some people go back to certain, you know, even childhood events, and sometimes it's, you know, even where I was born or where I grew up. And I know I'm not asking a 20-year-old, so you've been through a lot of different things in life.
I don't look like a 20-year-old.
It must be the lighting, I'm sorry.
It's the lighting, yeah. Yeah, I could say what influenced me. My family growing up, meaning I came from a very, I don't have to use a euphemism. I don't have to say progressive family. No. My father was a communist. My mother must have been a fellow traveler. I don't think she ever joined the party. A lot of their friends growing up were also party people. That influenced me. It influenced me in different ways. In terms of justice and what is right and what you fight for, what you go towards. Also, it's the 1950s. So, you know, it wasn't quite underground, but there was an element of there's danger out there. They're after us. Now, the fact that I was Jewish also, there's always that in the background too. And my father left the party, you know, the Khrushchev speech in 56, I think that was. But always, there was always some kind of mystery, you know. Why do you call this person your friend? Why do you call him by that name, but I know him by another name? Or I remember, I don't know how old I was, 12, 13, 14. I went on the Youth March for Integration to Washington. This is late 50s. And when I came back, got off the bus, and this woman sort of accosted my father. I had no idea who she was. And so I said to him after, I said, well, who was that person? That was somebody from the party trying to get him to come back. So there was always this background, you know. A knock on the door. Is Jeanette Lazarin here? Sure. Ma, there's someone at the door for you. She goes, she slams the door. I said, you know, and my mother was a very friendly person. She was head of the PTA and, you know, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts. My father was Cub Scouts. I don't know. You know, it was all that neighborhood stuff. So why would you slam the door on somebody? He was a bad guy. He was from the FBI. So that was part of my
Those are circumstances. Those are circumstances.
shaping of who. And, you know, I'd go to junior high school. You know, junior high school has a wider draw than the public school, the local school, elementary school. And I meet people, and we'd have a code when we, you know, here we are, we're 13 years old. We're trying to feel each other out. Where do you live? Who do you know? And there was a kind of a code. Oh, how do you know? Oh, well, our parents from the old days. The old days was like 10 years ago, you know? So that was gave me a background, gave me a sense of the world, of what was right, what was wrong, where I should be, who I should hang out with. Strong sense, strong sense. Junior high school, you know, I always got involved, you know, student government. I was a student government in college. Yeah, but in high school, I was a newspaper. I became the editor of the newspaper. I wasn't involved with the student government people, but I was involved with the newspaper. You know, in college, I was on the, I don't know what we called it. I guess you had to be elected. Yeah, yeah. And that's where I also got my first group experience. They used to have this thing called freshman orientation, which was like this lecture. Welcome to City College. This is the way the bathroom is. This is where the cafeteria is. This is what your courses are going to be, blah, blah, blah. This is how we do it. And there was a whole new, I think it was the Department of Student Life, they called it. And there was a whole new generation of people active there. And they decided, I don't know, you know, how they came to this conclusion. They probably were taking courses themselves and trainings themselves, that it would be really good to have small groups. You know, you have a large greeting assembly and then break into small groups that would meet over 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I completely forgot about this. And we had, I don't know how I volunteered to do it. It was like, I guess I was a sophomore by that time. And we went for what I would now describe as a group training. It was a weekend, small Catholic college in New Rochelle. And they deposited us, you know, go to this room, that room. We went to our room, assigned room, waiting for the leader, the teacher, the leader, who would give us all the information of how to do a group. And of course, no one showed up for the first hour and 15 minutes. And we sort of organized ourselves. This was a learning experience. And then someone came in and said, "Hi, girls and boys, how was that?" You know, and we had a whole weekend, but that was that first night. I don't remember the rest of the weekend, but that was, and the people, it turned out they were from the National Training Institute or something. It's in Maine, and it has some kind of, I don't know if they still exist. They did exist to the end of the 20th century. National Training Lab or something like that. So I did groups. I got, Peace Corps was a very important experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
Peace Corps was a very important experience. I mean, I lived in Seattle. I went to graduate school in Seattle. So that's when I left New York on a full-time basis, on my own, right? Out of my parents' house. But I still was in the US, you know, and went in the Peace Corps. And that was after graduate school. After graduate school, I worked in Albany as a city planner for the governor. And then I went in the Peace Corps. That was major. I mean, that was also, I'll just keep saying 40 years ago. I won't go into the 40 plus.
We won't adjust the numbers. That's okay.
It's actually, it could be 50 years ago. Peace Corps could be 50 years ago. Yeah, we had all those 50-year anniversaries. Assassination of Bobby Kennedy, assassination of Martin Luther King. That was the year I went into the Peace Corps. That was 68. I did my training in the summer of 68 and went down to Santiago in September of 68.
Hot times.
It's great times. I learned how to eat artichokes in the Peace Corps.
Useful skill.
And smoked a lot of dope.
Nice.
And was on my own. I mean, I worked within a structure. Worked at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. I don't know if I wore a tie every day, but I did wear a suit jacket most of the time. Sport jacket. This was not Peace Corps. English as a second, English is, or go out to this village and build a pump. No, this was not my Peace Corps. My Peace Corps was, I lived in the city.
Okay.
And went to work every day, in the ministry.
Interesting. So how did you end up in Gestalt?
Well, like I said, it came through, I mentioned Identity House. So after the Peace Corps, I quit Lima, came back to New York, looked for a job in city planning, Christmas, I worked in a department store. I never got a job in city planning then. I did get a job eventually with this firm that I mentioned, because they had just gotten a new contract, it was urban affairs, and they said, oh, why don't you? It was actually the vice president of that firm was a good friend of my parents. From the party. I mean, they were not just they became friends then, but they were friends over their whole adult life. And so she hired me. She knew I was looking, and they had got this new contract about urban stuff and thought I might be, good at it, which I was and still am. But I wanted more. When I first came back, I was living at my parents' house, but then I got a sublease for the summer. I liked the neighborhood in Brooklyn. Got my own apartment in the neighborhood, and I began meeting people. And one of the people I met was this guy, Michael Altman. And he was telling me about this group that was starting a peer counsel organization. And I had no idea what peer counseling was. And we double dated with Lee Zevi and her girlfriend, Lucy, at the time. And Lee was also very involved in this Identity House. And they said, well, it's reforming, and because there was an internal fight, how it is. And soon as it starts up again, he can join. And that was like pretty soon. It was like, must have been 73, June of 73, I think. And yeah, and you had to be screened, interviewed by a bunch of people. And so I started peer counseling, and I was in supervision with Karen. And then as we're going along, I liked what I was doing, and I liked these people, Patrick, Michael, Karen, and they were all involved at the New York Institute for Gestalt Therapy. I don't remember specifically them saying, maybe they did, who remembers? And the whole Identity House was structured, built, created around Gestalt principles of associating, creating, moving together, consensus, da 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 da. And the way at the New York Institute, still is. It's not like a structured, take this class, that class, that class, and here's your certificate, go be a therapist. It's, Heather, you're having a workshop that's going to last for 6 months. Can I be in your workshop? Great. I've learned a lot from you now. I think I want to go with somebody else. And you build that way. And so Patrick was giving something called a practicum. People were giving practicums, people were giving theory groups, And so I joined Patrick's practicum, and where I began to learn about Gestalt therapy. And then I joined the theory group. I was with, I know I was in a theory group with Dan Bloom, but that might have been a little bit later, where we were reading the original, Gestalt therapy book. Mm-hmm. And I was as years went on, not that many years, but by the late 70s, I was in a group that Laura Pearls was teaching. It was like we'd meet one Saturday every month. That's what it was. And then I joined a group. But Vida had a group. He had a group with Ruth Vernal. I was in Laura's group for about 2 years. I mean, I can't tell you exactly. Was it 18 months, 2 years? And the Bud and Ruth group, that was also at least 2 years. I was a group with Richard Kitzler. And at some point, the way the New York Institute is, and it's the way Identity House was too, you put yourself forward. I'd like to be, you're an associate member, I'd like to be a full member. And you had 2 people would have to sponsor you, Bud was one of my sponsors. I forget who the other one was. Might have been Richard. I don't know. Maybe it was Michael. I don't remember. And I got full membership, which means people could give you referrals.
Okay. And
the same thing at Identity House. I mean, I was peer counselor, but then I said, I want to be a therapist too. So within Identity House, you go through an interview and we'll accept you as an Identity House therapist. You can get referrals. So, so I put my shingle out. Those were the days before New York State was one of the few states you didn't need a license to be a psychotherapist. I couldn't get an insurance reimbursement, but that didn't bother me since this was not my full-time work. Right. I did this part-time.
Was this overlapping with the 30 years in the consulting company?
Oh yeah, that would I do during the day, and then I would do Identity House and my psychotherapy at night. Mm-hmm. I would see people both in my apartment, and then at one point, I was seeing enough people, I was able to rent an office space 2 nights a week. I rented from Karen. I rented from at her office. And I did some groups. I did some groups. It was mostly individuals. I did supervision. I still do supervision for Identity House once a year.
And what is your thing in Gestalt? I mean, I know it's just to pick one. There's been so many. There's been
my thing.
What is your thing? What is
No,
the thing
I don't
like. You don't like those questions.
No, like I said, I understand the question. And, if I were Dan Bloom, I would talk about phenomenology or, nah, I'm not. I mean, groups. I like groups. I like the way groups work. I'm interested in the application of like an organizational development.
Right.
This is, I guess, maybe that's the answer to your question. Gestalt, maybe in another universe, I'm an OD consultant. Could be. There could be a Burt Lazarin out there in that other universe, and he does OD work all over the world,
I mean, I know I certainly enjoy your perspective, and with everything you're saying, I'm just like, oh, that's really interesting. Just the way you see the underlying structures in the small interactions that we've had on organizations. I've always admired. You seem to see, it's like you understand the subways and the plumbing and the systems that support the whole structure, and I'm just sort of walking into a building, but you've already figured out the way the whole thing is balanced, and I appreciate that about you. Now I'm starting to maybe understand some of the depth that comes behind that.
It's interesting you say that. Thank you. I'm on my local community board in New York. New York City is divided into 59 community boards, and there's about 48, 50 people on each board. We're appointed. It's not an elected position, but by the city charter, lots of different kinds of procedures have to be initiated. We can't say yes, no. We make recommendations to the city council, to the city planning people, to the state liquor authority, And I remember when I was first appointed, it's over 15 years now, that first meeting, you introduce yourself, there's usually like 4 or 5 people are appointed to replace people who leave, whatever. And I remember saying, I want to find out how you people operate. I remember this now. I said, I know what the official structure is, but I want to find out how decisions are made here and who makes the decisions. And that's what I'm looking forward to. And I did. I figured
you did. There's definitely something to that about groups and structures that seem to come very naturally to you. Huh.
Maybe he's coming from a large family. Well, 5 people is not a large, but we had cousins, and we lived in a 2-family house. So upstairs was my grandmother, grandfather, and one of my aunts. And there was always people around.
What I don't even know how to phrase this properly. I haven't spoken politically correct English for a long time, I guess. What is your family background like, nationality wise?
Nationality? My mother's side of the family, they're mostly just about Polish.
Okay.
Though when I went to look for her village on the map, I couldn't find it. And then I said, the boundary changed in 100 years. So I crossed the line into Belarusia. Oh, there's the village, And my father's family they're Lithuanian Jews. But they're Jewish, But Lithuanian Jews and Polish Jews. It's, it's all in the same neighborhood, basically. I mean, at one time, there was a United Kingdom. We're going back to 500-600 years ago, of the Kingdom of Lithuania and Poland. It was one country. what that really meant in those days, who knows? I mean, it's probably some prince married some princess, and
Yeah, there wasn't so much, unionized urban planning involved in having a
no.
kingdom.
So I don't know if that answers your question there.
That was just curiosity that popped up.
No, in the neighborhoods I grew up with, it was a Jewish Italian neighborhood. There was some Irish, and then African Americans began moving in about 10 years after we moved in. It was a new neighborhood, a relatively new neighborhood in the Bronx, that was developed after World War II. Row houses, brick row houses, I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, that's just, I don't know a lot of New York history, but when I hear you speak, I'm like, yep, you sound like a New Yorker, very much part of the place in your history.
And partly the answer to your question is also working class. On my mother's side, my father's side was more lower middle class. My grandfather, his father had a small business, printer, or there was ink on his hands. I think what they did was they would get paper and they line the paper, they put holes in the paper and then resell it. I mean, they were like the middleman. The middleman in some kind of process,
Okay, well, another thing that we are curious about, and this is something that not everyone chooses to answer or is really even interested in, but it's figural to them, but I'll ask anyhow. I'm curious, we're sort of asking it within the Gestalt context, but it's also about your person, which is, how have you experienced your gendered self or yourself as a man?
What was the question here? How did I experience?
You experienced yourself, your gendered self or yourself as a man? And is that even a relevant category to you? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I would always say gay man. I would always put that before man. Okay. With difficulty initially and then less difficulty, but even, this internalized stuff that comes through every once in a while, and I'm still surprised. Really, is that still there? Yeah. I mean, I always had it growing up, lots of difficulty. I'm not like them for lots of different reasons. And the kind of man I am was one of the reasons. I didn't join the football team. I wasn't that interested. But I knew that may be different. I didn't join the Musical Comedy Society neither. Okay. Musical Comedy Society, though I did participate in the senior play in high school. And the alternate, we had a senior play, the official one, and then we had an alternate one that we did ourselves outside school.
And how did that go for you?
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. I don't have much of a singing voice, but I don't know what role I played. I might have been just, I think I have I do, not here with me, here in upstate New York, but.
You don't carry it with you when you're fleeing in the middle of
No, I just remembered I did recently come across the, what do you call it? The cast of characters.
Yeah, the playbill.
The playbill. Whatever. But that we mimeographed, if you know what mimeographing is. We mimeographed it off ourselves, right? Wasn't a slick job. But I still have lots of friends, not lots. A bunch of friends from those days. And going back to your question, I'm trying to think, like, I had three good friends, three good, and then a fourth one. We hang out together, junior high school, into college. We were all gay, but we never approached that at that point. Now, but it was interesting. We sort of congregated together. And two of those, no, it wasn't four, it was three. I was the fourth. Two, I'm still very close with two of them. Yeah. No, I remember. I mean, it was one of them, the summer of '67, I spent in London. And my friend was in Stratford that summer. And he had a boyfriend. And I was really struggling in London to find, it was just about still illegal, I think, in London. And there was no like list of gay bars that probably is all over the place now,
You can just hop on the internet, right?
Right. And he was having an affair, but didn't tell me, we talked about it 8 years later, and I was kind of angry post fact, Why didn't you tell me? Would have been so helpful. He could have helped me find places. And I'm trying to think, in some ways, who I am made it easier for me to hear what women had to say in terms of their presence in the organizations and their sense of self, what they wanted. Yeah. I don't know if that kind of answers your question or begins to answer, maybe.
Yeah, it does. And also what you've said about Identity House, what I know about it, I know through stories from Lee and, from my own sort of pieced together information.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that's pretty clearly like an organizing factor,
Yeah. It was very important to me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming you were there in some very difficult times, with AIDS and epidemic and things like that.
That was 10 years after, yes. Yes. I lost my best friend Michael, John, Patrick, just Steve. I used to carry around a list in my address book, a special list.
Mm-hmm.
I must have had it for through the almost end of the 80s. And then I said, as I got a new address book, I said, take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
Let go a little bit, Yeah, Identity House, we had they don't have a physical space anymore. They do everything, they rent a little bit and do it online. But when we had a physical space, we had a wonderful space. I was executive director a couple of times. I was clinical director a couple of times. Over the span of 30 years, you could do it a couple of times.
You come and go.
Come and go. But we had it was like in a synagogue. The list of those who've left, who've departed, who've died. Let's be clear, who have died. And we just kept adding names. Yeah. It's still around someplace in storage, since they don't have a physical place anymore, but it's around. I asked Lee recently, I don't know what the motivation was. I asked Lee, where is it? I'd like to see it. I really wanted to see it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is going to come out right. I'm going to try and phrase it properly, but
It'll come out the way it comes out.
it comes out the way it comes out. How is it for you at this stage of your life? You know, because you said a little while ago, you know, and they're all gone now, and they're all gone. You named some people, and then they're all gone now. How is aging for you? And this part of aging, some people don't do it so well. I mean, some people, you know.
Well, not everyone is gone.
No, I know that. But I
Not
mean, some of the friends that you and I have had in common, they've died. We were sitting together, you know, in the same room at a memorial for a bunch of colleagues who have died. And it's just something that I know keeps
It
happening.
happens.
So,
I'm still, out there. I haven't retreated. I mean, I'm not doing as much as I used to. Okay. Like with AAGT, this is, I've been, it doesn't matter what I've been. Currently, this is going to be the end. No more. I thought in September I would step down from the board. Well, whenever we figure this out, how we're going to do it, that's when I'm stepping down. So that's one less. I'm still on the community board. My term will be up next year. I'm going to ask for a reappointment. It's 2-year appointments. And that, I still like to, if we're allowed to travel, I like to be engaged with people. I like to walk down the street in my neighborhood and, oh, hi, Heather. How you been? I haven't seen you in a week or two. What's up? Just a 10-minute interchange. And then, I like that. I can't see being any other way. Sometimes I think, well, maybe we'll sell the place in Manhattan and I'll live up here sometime of the year and I'll live in Quito sometime of the year. And I say, well, what would it be like if I moved to Quito, even like 6 months of the year, 5 months? I couldn't just be there. I mean, when I go there now, it usually takes me about 4 or 5 days before I get out of the apartment in any major way, out of the neighborhood, because it just, but I couldn't live there without joining an organization or connecting and making friends. There's a well-established Gestalt Institute in Quito, and I'm sure I'd go to meetings once or twice. If somebody, I know Gianni was there a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I'm sure you would engage.
I would have gone.
Yep.
If I, so I can't see being someplace without finding a connection.
Actually, that's one of the, I think it's really the first time that I saw you, like in front of my face to face. It's usually through a screen. That's why I say it this way. It was in Toronto. You were coming up the stairs into the hotel lobby, and I was obviously going down the stairs for something. But you were beaming. You were like shining, and you were just smiling from ear to ear. I think it was the Saturday night of the dance. You were just like, you said something to the effect of, I'm just so happy to be here and in the middle of all of this. And you were just, it was like seeing you connected and just, you were glowing. And I can't imagine you shutting down and pulling away. I don't think that.
Yeah, so I think the answer to your question, how am I aging, is like, I'm doing what I do.
Yeah.
And then someday I'll stop. I will stop. voluntarily, I don't think so. You know, it will change and morph.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think one last thing that I would like to ask.
Oh, I
if-
just want to say one more thing. Okay.
Yeah.
One thing I do feel aging or being who I am now is part of the connecting is I like to give what I know, what I've gotten to know, to others.
Mhm.
And I guess that's a normal part of aging, I think, or a healthy part of aging. Like when I do a supervision group at identity, I got to be very careful because they can start throwing questions at me. And then the whole 2 hours is taken up by giving, you know, how was that? And what happened then? You know, that kind of stuff. And I'm aware of that, you know, that I could go on, but I don't because it's their group and it's their supervision.
But that's generosity as well. I mean, that's nice. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So your last question, I'm sorry.
Well, the last question, I have a whole bunch of other ones, but you've kind of covered most of them. And the last one that I would like to ask is, what have you taken from Gestalt? What has it given you in your time that you've been involved with this? Gestalt for your person, what has it given you?
It's given me, my first thought was give me friends. Give me friends, give me lovers. Uh, it's given me a way of looking at the world and connecting to the world that either I didn't have before or it helped me cohere the incoherent ideas I had and helped me give me a theoretical way of looking at things and being with people. Yeah, the whole sense of take a deep breath and be here. That's major. Because be here can be, you know, in the middle of a forest, the middle of a city, the middle of a group, you know, a family, a couple, you know, yeah. Yeah. And I do appreciate when I'm on the listserv and I hear these discussions about this or that. I mostly appreciate, besides the content, sometimes I follow the content, sometimes it's not interesting to me. But what I do appreciate very much is the people's passion with which they discuss and argue over these issues. Most of the time. I don't like it when I hear someone try to annihilate the other.
No, I mean that's one thing that I appreciate about Gestalt is the way that it holds difference, and it's one of those, a Gestalt space is one that's going to allow difference and hopefully dialogue, like you say, without needing to annihilate the other one.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add right now?
Just thank you. You know?
Thank you.
Yeah. We covered a lot of territory, I think.
Yeah. So if it's okay with you, I will say thank you again, because I do appreciate you and I appreciate this time. And,
Thank you.
we'll leave it here.
Okay. Thanks.